Ladies and gentlemen, today we gather to discuss a hypothetical yet globally impactful scenario, the possibility of a war between the United States and China and the international response that could shape the course of history. In times of conflict, alliances become the backbone of global strategy. The United States, with its long-standing network of allies, would likely not stand alone. Nations that share its democratic values, economic ties, and security interests may rise in support, not out of blind allegiance, but in pursuit of global balance, regional stability, and the defense of a rules-based international order. Key countries like Japan, Australia, the United Kingdom, and several NATO allies would likely side with the US, each with their own strategic stakes in the Indo-Pacific region and commitment to collective defense. It's important to remember that support doesn't always mean direct military involvement. It may come in the form of intelligence sharing, sanctions against adversaries, logistical support, or humanitarian aid. In this interconnected world, war is not only fought with weapons, but also with diplomacy, trade, and information. This topic reminds us of the delicate balance of global power and the importance of peace. The goal of analyzing such scenarios is not to invite conflict, but to better understand the paths to prevent it. Let us hope that through dialogue, cooperation, and strong alliances, we can secure a future where such conflicts remain theoretical and peace, the reality. Thank you. One of the most significant advantages the United States holds on the global stage is its web of strategic alliances, many of which were formed in the aftermath of World War II and strengthened during the Cold War. These alliances are not merely symbolic. They are backed by mutual defense treaties, joint military exercises, intelligence cooperation, and coordinated responses to global threats. In the context of a hypothetical conflict with China, these alliances would be critically examined and potentially activated, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region where China's influence has been rapidly expanding. The presence of American bases, forward-deployed troops, and logistical networks in allied countries serves as a foundation for collective action if tensions escalate. Japan is perhaps the most prominent of these allies in the Asia-Pacific. Bound by the U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, Japan is home to over 50,000 American military personnel and serves as a major operational hub for U.S. forces in the region. While Japan's pacifist constitution limits its engagement in offensive warfare, recent legislative and strategic changes have allowed for more proactive roles in collective self-defense. Tokyo has grown increasingly concerned about Chinese military maneuvers in the East China Sea, particularly around the disputed Senkaku Islands. In a conflict involving China, Japan would likely play a pivotal role by offering its territory for logistics, surveillance, and potentially even coordinated defense operations. Australia is another steadfast U.S. ally with deep defense ties rooted in the ANZ-US Treaty. In recent years, Canberra has taken a firmer stance against Chinese influence in the Pacific, pushing back against economic coercion and espionage concerns. Australia has hosted large-scale military exercises with the United States and has increasingly integrated its defense planning with American strategic interests. The acquisition of nuclear-powered submarines through the AUKUS Pact is a clear signal of its commitment to long-term defense cooperation. In a conflict scenario, Australia's strategic location and advanced naval capabilities could serve as both a forward operating base and a logistical lifeline for U.S. forces. South Korea, while geographically closer to North Korea, is also a key partner that cannot be overlooked in this context. The U.S.-South Korea alliance includes over 28,000 American troops stationed on the peninsula, and both nations have prepared extensively for various contingencies, including potential conflicts involving broader regional powers. While South Korea's involvement in a China-related war would depend on the nature of the conflict and its impact on Korean security, the country's alliance obligations and fear of regional destabilization could draw it into the U.S. orbit. South Korea also hosts critical missile defense systems like THAAD, which are part of broader regional security architectures aimed at containing threats. Beyond Asia, the United States would likely rely on its global partners to provide support in the event of a major war. The United Kingdom, for example, has demonstrated its willingness to project power in the Indo-Pacific, sending aircraft carriers through contested waters and deepening military ties with Australia and Japan. Other NATO countries may not have direct interests in the region, but their commitments to transatlantic. The North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, is one of the most powerful and enduring military alliances in history, originally established to counter Soviet influence in Europe. While its core focus has traditionally been the Euro-Atlantic region, NATO has evolved over the decades to respond to global challenges beyond its borders. In a hypothetical war between the United States and China, the role of NATO becomes complex but nonetheless significant. Although the Indo-Pacific is geographically outside NATO's formal area of operations, the alliance's support could still manifest in multiple forms, depending on the scale, cause, and global ramifications of the conflict. The United Kingdom, as a leading NATO member and one of the United States' closest allies, would almost certainly stand in strong political and operational alignment with Washington. British forces have already increased their presence in the Indo-Pacific, including the deployment of the HMS Queen Elizabeth aircraft carrier in joint exercises with US and Japanese forces. The UK sees the rise of Chinese assertiveness as a direct challenge to international maritime law and the rules-based order. In a scenario where US interests or allied territories are under direct threat from China, London might provide not only political backing but also tangible military assets, intelligence support, and cyber capabilities in defense of its transatlantic partner. Other NATO members, such as France and Germany, may also find themselves drawn into the geopolitical dimensions of a US-China conflict, albeit with more caution. France has overseas territories in the Indo-Pacific, such as New Caledonia and French Polynesia, giving it a strategic stake in the region's stability. Paris has conducted freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea and has expressed concern over China's growing military presence. Germany, while more economically intertwined with China, has recently shifted its stance by sending naval vessels to the Indo-Pacific and recognizing the risks posed by over-reliance on Chinese markets. These developments suggest that leading European powers are beginning to align their defense postures more closely with US concerns. It's also important to consider NATO's institutional role and its Article 5 clause, which states that an attack on one member is an attack on all. While a conflict in the Indo-Pacific wouldn't automatically trigger Article 5, especially if it does not involve an attack on US or European soil, the political implications of such a major war could push the alliance into a unified response. In recent years, NATO has increasingly addressed the strategic challenge posed by China in its communiques and policy discussions. The alliance has begun to explore partnerships with Indo-Pacific democracies like Japan, Australia, and South Korea, signaling that the threat environment has expanded beyond Europe's borders. Furthermore, NATO's collective resources, ranging from advanced surveillance platforms and cyber defense units to strategic airlift capabilities and multinational naval task forces, would offer immense support to the United States in a prolonged confrontation. While not every NATO country may contribute troops or hardware directly to a conflict far from home, the alliance could still provide vital logistical hubs, intelligence sharing, and rear area security in Europe and beyond. This collective support would enable the US to reallocate more of its own forces toward the Indo-Pacific theater, confident that its flank in Europe remains secured by its allies. When analyzing how countries may support the United States in a hypothetical war with China, it's crucial to understand that support is not limited to the deployment of troops or active combat participation. In modern warfare, especially among interconnected global powers, support takes on many forms, each contributing to a broader strategic advantage. From intelligence and cyber capabilities to economic sanctions and supply chain logistics, allied nations can play pivotal roles without engaging directly on the battlefield. The nature of the conflict, its location, and the political will of each nation would influence the type and degree of support provided. One of the most significant forms of non-combat assistance would be intelligence sharing. The United States operates within several intelligence sharing frameworks, the most notable being the Five Eyes Alliance, which includes the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These countries already collaborate closely on surveillance, signals intelligence, SIGINT, and cyber monitoring. In the event of a war with China, this network would become a critical asset, helping track Chinese military movements, intercept communications, and anticipate strategic decisions. Such intelligence could save lives and offer the US a vital edge in both conventional and cyber warfare domains. Cybersecurity and digital. When analyzing how countries may support the United States in a hypothetical war with China, it's crucial to understand that support is not limited to the deployment of troops or active combat participation. In modern warfare, especially among interconnected global powers, support takes on many forms, each contributing to a broader strategic advantage. From intelligence and cyber capabilities to economic sanctions and supply chain logistics, allied nations can play pivotal roles without engaging directly on the battlefield. The nature of the conflict, its location, and the political will of each nation would influence the type and degree of support provided. One of the most significant forms of non-combat assistance would be intelligence sharing. The United States operates within several intelligence sharing frameworks, the most notable being the Five Eyes Alliance, which includes the UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. These countries already collaborate closely on surveillance, signals intelligence, SIGINT, and cyber monitoring. In the event of a war with China, this network would become a critical asset, helping track Chinese military movements, intercept communications, and anticipate strategic decisions. Such intelligence could save lives and offer the U.S. a vital edge in both conventional and cyber warfare domains. Cybersecurity and digital warfare are increasingly central to modern conflict, and allies could contribute significantly in this area. Countries like Estonia, the UK, and Israel have advanced cyber defense capabilities and could help defend U.S. networks, launch countermeasures, or protect shared digital infrastructure from Chinese cyber attacks. In fact, a cyber war could erupt alongside or even in place of kinetic military actions, making these capabilities essential to maintaining national and alliance security. Coordinated cyber responses could disrupt Chinese command systems, interfere with propaganda efforts, and protect the integrity of democratic institutions worldwide. Logistical and material support would also be vital. In a high-intensity conflict across the Pacific, the U.S. military would need vast amounts of fuel, food, ammunition, spare parts, and medical supplies. Allied countries could open their ports and air bases to U.S. forces, easing the strain on American supply chains. Countries like Japan, Australia, and the Philippines, due to their geographical proximity, are especially valuable in this regard. Meanwhile, NATO members could contribute through transatlantic airlift capabilities, maintenance facilities, and rear echelon support, allowing the U.S. to maintain a sustained military presence far from home. Another powerful non-military tool is the implementation of coordinated sanctions and trade restrictions against China. If a conflict broke out, many U.S. allies could apply economic pressure through diplomatic isolation, freezing of Chinese assets, restrictions on Chinese tech firms, and limiting China's access to key resources and markets. While these actions wouldn't directly affect the battlefield, they could have enormous long-term consequences by weakening China's economic resilience and forcing difficult choices about its military expenditure. Unified economic action could also deter other nations from siding with Beijing, thereby reinforcing global pressure against aggression. The strength of U.S. alliances isn't built solely on military cooperation. It is deeply rooted in shared democratic values, historical partnerships, and extensive economic interdependence. Countries that uphold democratic governance, human rights, freedom of expression, and the rule of law often find common ground with the United States. These ideological ties form a powerful foundation for strategic alignment in times of global crisis. In the event of a war between the U.S. and China, many of these democracies would likely see their support for the U.S. not just as a political obligation, but as a defense of the liberal international order they help uphold. Nations in Europe and the Indo-Pacific, such as Germany, the United Kingdom, France, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and Canada, are not only longtime allies of the United States, but are also democracies that share its vision for a free and open international system. These countries are increasingly alarmed by China's actions in the South China Sea, its authoritarian political model, and its growing influence in global institutions. In a conflict scenario, many of them may view support for the U.S. as a stand against authoritarian aggression and a move to preserve a world order where sovereignty, international law, and human rights are respected. Economic interdependence is another compelling factor. The U.S. is one of the largest trading partners for many allied countries, and American foreign direct investment (FDI), technology cooperation, and access to markets play a vital role in their economies. While many of these countries also have significant trade relations with China, the long-term trust and stability offered by economic ties with the United States may outweigh the short-term costs of siding with it in a conflict. Moreover, coordinated trade policies, sanctions, and technological restrictions against China could be more impactful and sustainable when executed by a unified group of economically powerful democracies. Additionally, many U.S.-aligned nations have formed multilateral economic or security groups that enhance their cooperative frameworks. For instance, the Quad Alliance, U.S., India, Japan, and Australia, and AUKUS, Australia, the U.K., and the U.S., reflect a growing trend of democracies banding together to counterbalance China's influence in the Indo-Pacific. These alliances are not only strategic in military terms, but also serve as statements of shared values. Their evolution into deeper partnerships in areas such as infrastructure investment, digital governance, and supply chain security demonstrates how values and economic strategies increasingly overlap. In times of crisis, countries are more likely to support those with whom they share a history of trust, mutual benefit, and ideological alignment.
When the stakes involve not just territorial disputes but the broader contest between democracy and authoritarianism, nations may choose sides based on the principles they hold most dear. The economic strength and democratic character of the US-led alliance system gives it a unique ability to mobilize global support, not only through coercion or pressure, but through the natural pull of shared identity and purpose.